Hello, everyone. I'm Eric Lorber. I'm the director of Rain Taxi, and I'm pleased to welcome you to the 20th Twin Cities Book Festival. I see in the chat already that some of our viewers in St. Paul are remembering what it's like when we can gather at the Minnesota State Fairgrounds. We miss seeing all of you in person, cramming into those big buildings, but we're thrilled to be doing this online, and we're having a blast gathering so many favorite authors from near and far to entertain and educate us over these next 3 days. We've got 19 of these author events to offer you. We have even more pre-recorded presentations in our Minnesota Writers Mashup and our new chapbook launch. We've also got an incredible exhibit hall filled with publishers, organizations, and authors who are waiting to share their passions with you. I know if you look around the website, it's brand new. We're really proud of it, and we know you'll find something interesting. There's a book for everybody. I'm delighted now to introduce this particular author panel, Friendship and Family, Character in YA Literature. We have with us some incredible writers. Eric Gansworth, who I first read as a poet, but who has written novels as well, and whose brand new book is a multimedia and multi-genre YA work called Apple, Skin to the Core. Lamar Giles also writes for teens and adults in many different genres. His most recent YA novel, Not So Pure and Simple, came out earlier this year. And Justin A. Reynolds, whose second and anticipated YA novel, Early Departures, was just published last month. Moderating this session again is Donell Clauser, a youth librarian here in Minnesota. And again, I want to send so many thanks to all the librarians out there who enrich our book world. I want to again remind our viewers that you can ask questions in the question field at the bottom of your screen. You can buy books by all the authors by hitting the link down there as well. And you can donate if you choose to Rain Taxi. All the donations we get during the festival go right into planning our 2021 festival, wherever that may be. Again, welcome to you all, and I'll hand it over to Donell.
Thank you, Eric. So I'm super excited to be moderating today, and welcome authors and welcome audience. I guess we could start in a basic place, and I'll just ask you if you can tell us something about your new books. Would Eric like to start?
Sure. My book is it is a memoir in poems, prose poems, free verse, formal verse, paintings, and photographs. So, and I kind of wanted to confront the title is a confrontation on an intra-group slur, and it's some Indians will accuse other Indians of being red on the outside, white on the inside. And I was really interested in getting to the heart of that and sort of where it came from and how it affects kind of everybody who is either choosing to say it and those who are being forced to hear it. So that was kind of the origin of the work.
Lamar?
Sure. Not So Pure and Simple is about a young man named Delbert Rainey Jr. who accidentally joins a purity pledge at his church because a girl he likes is in it. He's the only kid in church allowed to take sex ed at their high school, and so he becomes the de facto sexpert, answering the church kids' questions that they can't ask their parents or their clergy. He's a self-proclaimed nice guy, but during the course of finding out more about himself and the people around him and the spaces he invades, he has to question whether he is as nice as he thinks he is.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, and Justin?
Sure. Early Departures is a book about best friendship, two best friends who are the kind of friends that grow up together and imagine that they'll always be best friends long into their adult years. But unfortunately, that friendship has ended at the start of the book 2 years prior with the death of our main character, Jamal's parents. And so this book is about them trying to find their way back with the added complication of Quincy's death, which actually happens, which is the best friend, which actually happens in the very beginning of the book. And so it's about not only about friendship, but it also has a speculative element in which Quincy, thanks to this new healthcare technology called reanimation, is actually brought back to life. The trick is, the catch is, it's only for a short period of time. He gets 3 weeks to kind of say his goodbyes. And then on top of that, Quincy also doesn't know that he's died because the technology kind of requires you to reset your brain a little bit in order for the person not to have a rude awakening as they're brought back into the real world. And so now this entire time of this 3 week period, Quincy is kind of going about his life as normal. And yet, of course, the people around him, those who love him, are not only trying to make amends, as is in the case of Jamal, but also trying to give him the best 3 weeks of his life.
Excellent. So one of the things I really enjoyed about all of your books was sort of the deep exploration of the book's subjects. And so I wondered how much of you is in your characters for the fiction books? And then for Eric, I mean, it's about you, but how did you balance how much of you versus your family and community, you were kind of representing? So does anyone want to start with that one?
I can go. With this book, you ask how much of me is in, say, Dell or any other characters, and I would say some. I know that's vague, but the truth is I never did or said the exact things Dell says and does, but I've been close enough. And I think about my friends have been close enough. And then dudes I hate have been close enough. And that's weird when you think about like me, people I like, people I don't like, have all done these similar questionable things. And then that becomes, oh, this behavior needs to be examined by everybody. And so like the people I rock with and the people I don't. And so while I say Dell is an exaggeration, he's not an over exaggeration. And so there's a little bit in there that I think all men, myself included, need to work on.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just say that in terms of my story, in terms of early departures, I think like I probably just about anything I've ever really written has stemmed from some kind of personal question, at the very least. It may not be an exact story. Most of these aren't exact replicas of things that have transpired in my life, but they are definitely, my personal life is definitely kind of the starting ground for a lot of these ideas. And in this case, this story kind of sprang forth from the death of one of my best friends, and it was a very untimely death. He was very young, and the way that it happened left me with a lot of questions, and also kind of forced me to examine what I believe, my own belief system. And this book was kind of born of that, kind of asking the questions. What are we here for? Why do bad things happen to good people? All the things that we kind of at some point in time, think about ourselves. And even though sometimes it's difficult to come up with solid answers, I think as Jamal learns in this story, the important thing is sometimes just the journey and just the asking of those questions out loud. And that's exemplified by the way that we choose to live our lives. And so definitely kind of sprang forth from a personal experience. And I just hope that, as I've said before, that the story does my friend justice. On the surface level, it's a bit of it seems like it'd be a bit of a sad story, but ultimately, Quincy is alive for most of the story, starting from very early in the beginning. And so it's really about a celebration of life and a lot about their humor and the way they kind of approach life, which was with a lot of levity.
Excellent.
I knew writing a memoir was going to be kind of a challenge, and obviously this is like 12 books in before I ever got to it, so I'm kind of actively avoiding it. In part because it's just very complicated. I know the American story is very much of the individual, and I come from a very small community that is extremely constructed in and of itself. It's like 1,200 people. My immediate family is like 60 something people, and my extended family, so it's like my cousins, there's like 350 of us, and we're all like in this really small place. And so to me, that whole idea of being the individual just kind of doesn't work. So I knew that writing a memoir was going to be writing as much about family and friends as it is writing about me, because in fact my whole sets of experiences was shaped by those interactions. And so I guess, it's weird that in a memoir, I am not necessarily the major character, but a major character.
Right. Great. Let's see. I thought we'd want to get to this. I have so many questions and not that much time. What perspectives or beliefs have you tried to challenge with your works, or specifically these books?
Well, I mean, and not so pure and simple. I try to take a crack at sexism, misogyny, homophobia, particularly in Black communities where individuals and institutions can encourage these behaviors. Some institutions. I've been in particularly churches where they're quick to call out the oppression we've suffered while not recognizing they're encouraging the oppression of women, of the members of the LGBTQ community. And those are things that I wanted to touch and address and hopefully open up discussions on among whoever reads Not So Pure and Simple.
Excellent.
I think that was really the stepping off point ultimately, is to ask that larger question of how does a community that is so frequently hassled and oppressed by others then end up oppressing members of its own very small group? Like why would you make the lives of people in your group even harder than they are? And so I wanted to get to that, and I'm not sure the answer I came up with is the answer, but it seems like a possible answer. And I traced it back to my grandparents' generation, and they went to the boarding schools, and the sole purpose of the boarding school was to wipe out Indigenous identity. And then they came home. And so I can't imagine what it was like for them to have been forced to live this whole other life, then be brave enough to come back home, and then eventually to be criticized by people at home by saying, well, now you're acting like those other people. And how we continue to navigate that. And because I'm also an educator and I'm somebody who spent a lot of my life in school at this point, I am sure, I don't think anybody's ever called me an apple directly to my face, but do I suspect it's happened? Most definitely.
Excellent.
Yeah, for me, it was a matter of kind of some introspection happening. I was thinking about my relationship with my friend who inspired the book, and because of the way that his life ended rather abruptly, I was considering all of the things that I had not yet said to him, the things that I thought I had an infinite amount of time to say, and kind of Lamar kind of touched on it, whether it's a result of kind of being in the African American community or being just a man, kind of realizing that there's a lot of emotional landscape between us that we had yet to really cross and discuss. And one of the things that I realized is that here's someone who knew me in ways that no one else would know me, who could often guess what I was thinking, who gave me the best counsel, and yet I never really told him that I loved him. And I thought, like, why is that? Why is it only occurring to me truly like now? And all the times that I could have said it where it been highly appropriate to say it, although there's not really a bad time to tell someone you love them, why did I always kind of shirk away from that? And I just thought I had to deal with my own kind of discomfort, and also kind of the way that I had been kind of molded to believe what's like masculine and what is bravery, what is courage. I realized that some of it also was like, maybe even though I don't think I was necessarily uncomfortable with that expression with him, I thought like, well, what if he doesn't receive it well, right? What does that mean? And so, I think there's an interesting question, the way that, I often heard men expressing love was with like grunts and noises and high fives and, and anything but those words. But if they would manage to actually utter those words, they had to tag on man at the end of it and kind of raise their voice into a high inflection. So it sounds like almost a joke. And you can pass it off as kind of whimsy. And so I thought, why can't I just tell someone who is literally one of the most important people in my life and remains that even after his death, that I love him? And so this story was kind of a love letter to my friend, but also a way for me to really explore and kind of and ask myself those questions. And hopefully, anyone else who is kind of mulling that over themselves will also find some answers here.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. So I was going to ask Justin, can you tell us about carpet denim in your book? And then I want to ask everyone, how do you have carpet denim, especially right now during this time of division and COVID? So go ahead if you would.
Yeah. So carpet denim is a mispronunciation of carpe diem, and so seize the day. And so when the main character Jamal is younger, he can't say it, and so he mispronounces it carpet denim, and so it kind of sticks. It becomes this tradition in which each member of his family, which is his mom, his dad, himself, and his older sister, alternate choosing to do an activity together as a family that will positively impact their community, their neighborhood, the world around them in big and small ways. And so sometimes, and that's in the case of the story, one that they were doing at the time, or that they were on their way to do prior to the accident that claimed their lives, they were going to plant some trees with the idea of, regenerating life and giving back to the earth in the ways that we've taken from it. And so I think, in my life, I think about oftentimes just the small ripple effect that little things can do. And I actually had this talk with a friend recently. We're kind of taught, maybe even now more than ever because of COVID, but even in general, that we kind of keep to ourselves. We kind of move in our own circles. Better to kind of mind your own business, look the other way. And I think oftentimes as I'm walking by people, and you smile at someone and you can kind of feel something kind of happen, because people oftentimes are like not prepared for that, for you to meet their eyes and to smile at them, to see them there, that in that small little way. And yet that smile is so small, all it does, it costs me a twitch of muscles. And yet who knows what the repercussions of that are? Who knows if that affects the trajectory of that person's next 30 minutes, which then in turn affects the trajectory of their dealing with this person, who then takes that and passes it along to someone else. And then now they're buying a coffee for the person behind them, and on and on and on. And it costs you nothing. So I think the carpet denim idea is just that we can give back, and it doesn't have to be in this extraordinary way, but yet the effects are the same.
That's great. And how do you guys carpet denim?
I would say that the one thing I've wrestled with, and I think a lot of people have, is that because we're all working from home in many cases, the work day can become your entire day. Like there aren't discrete beginnings and endings to the work day. So if you wanted to, you could begin when you get up and not stop until the very end of the day. And I'm kind of that person anyway. And so I have to sort of fight against it. And I fortunately have a few very good friends who are still willing to talk on the phone. But nobody wants to talk on the phone anymore. Everybody wants to text. And I love people's voices. I mean, one of the things that I discovered is that I generally think of myself as an antisocial person, but it's kind of not true. Like when I don't get to see my friends at work who I spend time with, I have meaningful relationships with, it's caused me great pain. And I have, like, one of my best friends is actually in the next session, Hyde Erdrich, here. And she and I talk like 3 to 4 times a week on the phone. And I don't think, we do it with very many people. I'm really happy and delighted that I have friends who are still willing to talk on the phone. So for me, that's the way I still see is a part of celebration, is to have the freedom to enjoy another person's company.
What?
I guess for me, it's me and my wife, and we live in a fairly isolated place in the mountains. And there was a time early in the COVID crisis where we probably went several weeks where we're the only people we saw. And in order to not like go insane, being isolated like that, we make sure that we go outside and we walk and we look at the mountains in the distance and remind ourselves that we live in this really beautiful place. And just the other day we went for a walk and I'm like, I can see the mountains and I see you. I'm going to take your picture. We can still do stuff like that to remind ourselves that we're not just locked in our house 24/7. And then beyond that, I know she does a thing where every other night she's FaceTiming with her best friends. And so a combination of using the phone and the camera to connect with people the best way she knows how. And for me, I'm a lifelong gamer, and I've reconnected with several high school friends by playing Call of Duty on PlayStation. And we're terrible. We lose to 12-year-old. But we just like to get on and talk to each other. And these are guys where before it was only a text message every 6th month. And now we're on there 5 nights a week. So we use the technology we have, and then we try to enjoy our time with each other.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. Well, on a different note, I haven't really asked anything about process, but do you play music when you're writing or creating? And if so, what's your favorite? And if not, what songs do you think your characters would enjoy? Or type of music?
I'll say, okay.
Okay.
No. I was just gonna say, I once upon a time I could not use music. I could not listen to music as I was writing at all. It just kind of was a distraction. It didn't matter if it was vocal or if it was instrumental. It just didn't work for me. But now I frequently, more times than not, I'm listening to music, and I typically build a playlist for each work in progress, and it accumulates quite a few songs, including some songs that I never kind of even go back to, but at the moment I thought that they might fit somewhere. And what happens is, like, I'll have a song that will then just kind of organically come to represent like an energy or a feeling in that thing, in the story that I'm working on. So like, whether I'm having trouble accessing that feeling because I've been working on something completely different or what have you, without fail, that song will take me right back to that same energy. And I can even listen to it. I could even be thinking about the scene that I need to write later this afternoon. I could be in the shower, I could be driving, and I listen to that song, and I'm immediately starting to formulate ideas and thinking about it. Things are kind of percolating. And so definitely rely on music to kind of do that. And I'm at the point now where I can listen to instrumentals. Sometimes I want songs with lyrics, depending on a certain mood. And the honestly, if you look at the playlist, they vary greatly. In my own general taste, are rather eclectic. I listen to a little bit of everything, and so my playlist kind of will also do that. And I hope that it kind of also then lends itself to making the characters kind of more fully rounded and multi-dimensional in their shape and feel.
That's great.
I used to listen to a lot. In fact, could only listen to music while I was, like, I couldn't write if I didn't listen to music. And as I've gotten older, that the process you just described is sort of the reverse for me now. So it's gotten harder and harder to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I've switched to now listening to either instrumental music, like there's this band from Texas I like a lot called Explosions in the Sky. And they do this like really slow meditative work that just builds and builds and builds. And I like Sigur Rós, who are from Iceland, and so they're singing lyrics that aren't from any conventional language. They're making it up, and so the lyrics aren't influencing what I'm doing, but I'm still getting the feel of it. And since like the Beatles are a major force in this book, so usually even when I was working on it, before I would write, I would kind of listen to some to sort of charge the batteries, even if I couldn't concentrate while the writing process was happening.
I just want to add real quick that Explosions in the Sky is also one of my favorite bands. And in my first book, it's like I actually still like there's a quote from Explosions in the Sky. The song, one of the song titles is in the book, and it's I listen to them like religiously.
Yeah, love them.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I'm the outlier because I can't do music while I'm writing. I absolutely cannot. I've tried everything, instrumentals, the music, movie scores, and it just does not work for me. I got to hear like my own words in my head, and when I play music, I just get distracted. I want to listen to the songs. But if I have to say what a character will listen to, it will probably be what I like to listen to when I'm not writing, which is pop, great lyricist, Black Thought's one of my favorites, so stuff like that.
Cool. Excellent. We've got about 4 minutes maybe till question time. So if anybody in the audience has questions for our guests today, we would love to hear them. In the meantime, I'm going to ask, what other, I know some are, but what other projects are in the works for you guys?
Oh, wow. I'm working on third book in my middle grade fantasy series, the Legendary Austin Boys series. So that the second book will be out next week. And like I said, I'm wrapping up the third book for the year. And we're going to do a spinoff series that'll be out in 2022. So that's taking up most of my time right now.
Awesome.
Actually, a story that Lamar published of mine several years ago is an early chapter in the next novel. So these young adult novels are kind of Beatles themed. The first was kind of Paul McCartney focused, and the second was John Lennon and Yoko Ono focused. So, and when that happened, various people in like different literary circles were like, "Oh, is the Ringo novel going to be next?" You know, like kind of slagging on Ringo. And I thought, well, now I have to make it because why you being mean here? So that's what I'm working on.
I'm kind of taking a little mini break from young adult, and I'm doing some middle grade work right now. So the next 3 projects actually are middle grade. Shot Clock is a series I'm doing with Karan Butler, former NBA All-Star, and that book is about this group of kids in this underserved community kind of rallying together after a tragedy happens there, and trying to find a way. And ultimately, it's about ask the question, if we were to give kids the resources that they're so often denied, which is also almost, which seems preposterous to even happen in this country. Imagine what they might do if they could imagine a world outside of their 3 or 4 block radius. And then the other book that I'm working on is a book called It's the End of the World, and I'm in my bathing suit. And that's a fun book that kind of a throwback to like the movies and the books that I grew up on, that kind of like always had that ragtag group of like misfit friends in the neighborhood who are kind of like just loosely kind of friends at the beginning, right? Of course, and they try to figure out how to find their way. And so in this case, the protagonist is has avoided laundry for the entire summer break, and so now he's down to his bathing suit. And of course, the end of the world happens the same day. And then the last thing that I'm working on right now is a graphic novel. It's my first graphic novel I've ever worked on, and that's Miles Morales Spider-Man graphic novel called Shockwaves, and that's been a lot of fun to do. I'm really excited about that.
Awesome.
Cool.
Let's see now. Okay, so someone has a question about Justin's wallpaper and what the figures are.
Yeah, I'm at my office. So this is a tiger, and we have an elephant. I guess it's kind of like a safari type thing. So there's like some antelope in there, a little bit of everything. Yeah, it's fairly random, but it's symmetrical. So
okay.
Excellent question, Jane.
Let's see. All right. Well, I've got like a bazillion more questions. So let's see if anyone. Oh, actually, though, someone in the audience has another question. It's Nicole, and she says, Lamar, can you talk more about your work with organizations We Need Diverse Books? To everyone, where did you first see yourself, your identities in books and media? I'll say this again. And how does it feel to be writing stories now and having young adults see themselves in your books? So I guess tell us about We Need Diverse Books, Lamar.
Sure. So We Need Diverse Books, the organization, is a nonprofit that was founded back in 2014, brainchild of Ellen O, who's a fantastic fantasy author. Please read her stuff. And we were just dedicated trying to make sure every child, regardless of their background, is able to see themselves in books, because that's not necessarily a vision that all of publishing shares. The outpouring of support has been great. I don't want to take too long to talk about this because I know there's other questions for my fellow panelists, but the organization just has done a lot to try to make sure that the idea of representation is proliferated throughout publishing. The website's diversebooks.org, and you can see all the various programs there.
Excellent. And the second part was, where did you first see yourself and your identities in books and media?
I would just say that this is a question that I'm actually asked quite often, and my mom retired as a librarian. I spent a great deal of my life basically living in the library, and so it's a second home for me. I saw lots of book covers. We always had the maximum 30 books checked out on our car between my sister and I, and so. I would say this though, most of the time, especially when I was younger, we didn't have the type of diversity that we're just starting now to truly see, especially in young adult literature and middle grade literature. So most of the time I was not seeing a reflection of myself. In fact, I can only think of one or two times in which there was a story that felt like it had been kind of written, even with just being mine, let alone directly for me. And so I feel that it's a great privilege, first and foremost, to be able to tell stories that represent me, but primarily that represent, I think, the point of view or the face, the way that the language, the situations of other young Black men in this country. And I think that, for so long, we've heard the old tired rhetoric that, young Black boys especially don't want to read books. They don't want to read. They don't like reading. They don't like reading. And I say, like, of course you don't like reading when you don't have anything that represents your real life, right? When it's not doesn't seem reflective of what your daily experience is as a human being on this planet. And so every kid deserves to not only have a story that looks and feels and talks like them, but every kid deserves to be the hero of a story. And that's the thing, is like, we need these stories to be front and center, but we can't just be the sidekick. We can't just be the comic relief. We need to be able to be at the front and center and be able to have the adventure, be the person who goes traveling back in time, the person who is saving the world, even in their scrumshots, right? And so I think that's what I'm happy to kind of be a part of, is to talk about that and to help kids of color see themselves not just in a story, but to be the story.
I think I was incredibly lucky in that for my super tiny community of 1,000 people, somebody of my parents' generation did in fact write and publish a book about reservation life. It was called The Reservation. His name was Ted Williams, and it came out the summer when I finished elementary school and was heading into middle school. So it was like the perfect time to not necessarily read it. I don't think I was disciplined enough to seek it out in that way, but to know that it existed was like a huge thing. So by the time I did read it in high school and I was ready for it, it never occurred to me not to be able to tell that story because he had done it before. And so it was just an incredible gift to have had somebody from my community do that, and for me to know that we've already been written about by somebody within.
Mm-hmm. Well, Lamar's gone, so the next question is, how do you put yourself in the mindset of a young person or your younger self? I assume that you have to do this as an adult writing YA, says B. I'm
pretty juvenile, as you can see. There's like a lot of toys and things here, so I'm kind of a kid like half the time, so it's pretty easy for me to jump into that.
Right.
Eric, you stole my answer. I was going to say the same thing. I was going to say that it's pretty easy when you haven't left that mindset entirely.
Right.
To conjure that up. It doesn't take a lot of summoning to go right back to that place. So, and then also I'm just I guess from a technical standpoint, I'm blessed to have like a lot of young people around, whether it be like visiting schools or family members, and so. Sometimes if I'm like, hey, before I rattle off this old expression that was from my teenage years, and you see if people are saying these kind of things anymore, or if this has become so outdated. It's funny because a friend of mine wrote a story about the 90s, which I was growing up in the 90s, and now that is considered to be historical fiction. So it lets you know what's happened just in a short period of time here, a couple of decades.
Isn't that a rude awakening?
It is. It is.
But to that, I always have this theory that certain emotional stuff doesn't change. So like with Not So Pure and Simple, the idea of you like someone who doesn't like you. No matter what decade you're in, your readers are going to understand that. And so that's the sort of thing I try to tap into. And much like Justin, I'm fortunate enough to have access to young people to kind of throw stuff at them and say, hey, does this sound crazy? Does it sound like I'm the old guy hanging out at your lunch table? and I can get feedback that way thanks to like younger cousins and things like that.
Awesome. I guess that's all for the audience questions at this point, but is there anything, I mean, I have more questions, but is there anything that you would like to talk about that hasn't come up? Anything that you really want to highlight?
You can ask me about what comic books I'm reading, because
so what are you reading?
I'm reading some stuff right now that I really issues of the old Milestone comics. So for anyone that knows comics, this is the old Dwayne McDuffie African American line of comics, like Icon and Rocket, Hardware, the old Static that became the Static Shock TV show. So a bunch of this stuff has been re-released, and so I'm just over the moon to be able to read this stuff again, like I did when I was 15 years old.
Awesome. Anybody else reading anything great or
I've been re-immersing myself in this super rich book that I discovered last year. My favorite thing is Monsters. It's a huge graphic novel. It's like 500 pages long of just really stunning work on every page. I believe the author's name is Emil Ferris or Emil. Just breathtaking. Yeah.
Excellent.
I'm reading a few things, but I'm going to I'll drop them sometime. I'll tweet them out or something because I'm terrible with titles and I don't want to butcher people's titles. I could just I could tell you what the books. I'm reading one book about Frida Kahlo and about how she led her life, how she led her creative life, and it's kind of a book of also kind of essays encouraging us to take chances and to follow our creative vision.
Awesome. I'm looking here. I think everything's okay. Well, I had a question. I had a question for Eric, but we were talking about a lot about graphics and things. But so for you and your book, what was your process of putting your poetry and visual arts together for the book? I mean, did it start as you know what I mean? Where did you get started with that?
So this is my 12th book, and pretty much every book previous to this has had that component to it. So I started like all kids do, drawing, and then I just was that kid that didn't stop and moved on to painting, and and kept pushing forward, and eventually started writing as well. And I want to say I had finished my first novel and was working on a second book. So this is like quite some time ago. And was also working on paintings for my first solo show at the same time, and deadlines were coming up. And I thought I would work on a painting for a long time until my hands hurt, and I would work on some poems to try to finish this book. And somewhere along the way, they merged into one project, and it was so fun to do that. That's kind of always been true. So I can never tell where the seed is. I think in this case, probably I was working or planning a series of paintings based on the Beatles' final album covers once they had created Apple Records, because I was playing with the idea of that slur even then, and so then that became like the organizational force behind the book of poems as well. So I'm not sure where one started, and then concluded, and the others like merged, and then after a while they started informing one another. So choices in the paintings grew out of poems that had been written, and so it's really a really organic process for me.
I had a follow up on that, but there's an audience question: who has pivotal kids books in their past? Who has a pivotal kids book in their past? Sorry.
Well, the Phantom Toll Booth's a big one for me. It directly inspired the middle grade series that I write now. Just the idea of this whole other world and this really clever wordplay, the puns. I never ever got over that book, and it's popping up in my work constantly now.
I'll say the book that I always enjoyed was was the Westing game, and I think primarily because, and I'll be honest, like it's been a long time since I read that book, but what I do remember is the entire story kind of being shrouded in this mystery, and the way that it also was able to handle like a large cast of characters. And so when I think about like my work, I think, there always has to kind of be this feeling of mystery. Something is not answered. That thread should be pulling the reader, through the storyline, and there should be some type of an investment. And even when you have maybe a larger cast than normal, still being sure to kind of infuse each character with their own personality, so that they stand out to the point where like you can hear each person's distinct voice, even just from a line of dialogue, whether it has a tag, a character tag or not. So I think those are some of the things. And also, I stole a lot of my sister's Babysitter Club books, before anyone tries to say it, those actually are well written books. So I just said that. Thank you. That's it.
I have to ask, have you seen? Oh, I'm sorry. Are you watching the show?
I've seen the show. Yes, yeah. I've seen the show.
The show is great.
The show. It's really good. Yeah, I love it. I love the show.
Excellent.
It was ahead of its time.
I think mine is probably super obscure. It was a book, probably early YA called "Where the Lilies Bloom."
Oh yeah.
By Bill and Vera Cleaver, and it's about a family in Appalachia and how their father dies and they cover it up, and so they kind of like create this illusion that he's still alive, and their household is extremely chaotic and falling apart. So I kind of recognized the resonance of the household I was living in that work, and so it was a way of seeing this work that spoke to me. And I mean, my family was more intact than that, but it was equally on the fringes. The family of sharecroppers, and so sometimes our lives felt like that too.
So it looks like I skipped a question. We've only got a few more minutes, but it's is the process for writing a graphic novel different from writing a traditional novel? And can you elaborate on that?
Oh, yes, it is different. It essentially looks like, when you look at the formatting for a novel, obviously we all know what prose looks like. A graphic novel, at least in terms of what I'm doing with Marvel, it's more like a script. So as the writer of the graphic novel, I'm working with an illustrator who's amazing, and so I write a description of each panel that happens on each page. So there's usually up to 6 panels in the format that we're doing, and then once I have everything kind of lined up, then I do all the dialogue. I number all the dialogue, and then I also include any special sound effects that I want to be included in that particular panel. So it reads very much like a TV script would read, in terms of that. So it's a lot more succinct, obviously, than prose. The idea is just to convey succinctly the thoughts of each panel as so the story progresses.
Right. We have 1 more minute. Anything anyone wants to add?
Thanks for being a great moderator.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
This is my first day of moderating ever. So you were great. You were great. Thank you.
Not tell.
And the audience was awesome too. They had good questions. So everybody enjoy the rest of the festival. Thank you very much. Bye.
Take care.
I don't know how to get out. There we go.